Don't forget that you can watch Chicago's Morning Answer on the Income Store live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
The Socialist Spice Girls, MFer Spice, Rashida Tlaib.
You changed it this morning. I thought it was always Talib.
It's Tlaib, I think. Tlaib, I think the A. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Brotherly Love Spice, held a joint presser yesterday to try to extend their performance art of being the victims in this matter with the state of Israel vis-a-vis Trump and Bibi. And here's what Representative Omar had to say. Notice the phraseology that's used: ban, occupation.
The decision to ban me and my colleagues, the first two Muslim American women elected to Congress, is nothing less than an attempt by an ally of the United States to suppress our ability to do our jobs as elected officials. But this is not just about me. Netanyahu's decision to deny us entry might be unprecedented for members of Congress, but it is the policy of his government when it comes to Palestinians. This is the policy of his government when it comes to anyone who holds views that threaten the occupation, a policy that has been edged on and supported by Trump's administration. That's because the only way to preserve unjust policy is to suppress people's freedom of expression, freedom of association, and freedom of movement.
Mm-hmm. And Israel, a quote-unquote democracy in the Middle East, and that's what Omar said. She did the air quotes when she characterized Israel as a democracy. Not acting like one.
This is predicated on there being an important ally in the region and the only democracy in the Middle East. But denying visit to duly elected members of Congress is not consistent with being an ally, and denying millions of people freedom of movement or expression or self-determination is not consistent with being a democracy.
Israel's not a democracy, according to Representative Omar, and in addition to that, until they become one, in her eyes, we should withhold any foreign aid to Israel. David Harsani has a good piece on this at the Federalist, just going through the lies being told by Tlaib and Omar, and they are many and varied, starting with this idea that they're being singled out because of their faith and separated out from their fellow congressmen. Not true. He points out they could have easily joined the group of 70 of their colleagues and met with Israeli and Palestinian authority officials if a trip is supposedly part of their duties, as they assert, to learn about the situation on the ground. Instead, what they did is planned a separate trip with an itinerary designed by Miftah, which is a group that has long praised suicide bombers, and as any good anti-Semites do, writes Harsani, claim that Jews use the blood of Christians in the Jewish Passover. These are two individuals who've also pushed out a political cartoon lampooning Bibi and Trump, done by a cartoonist who finished second, runner-up, in the annual Iranian Holocaust cartoon contest. Tell me again how these are victims rather than what they actually are: anti-Semitic, disingenuous hate mongers. That's who these two are.
They are acting like victims because there's always tears involved when it comes to Tlaib.
As a young girl visiting Palestine to see my grandparents and extended family, I watched as my mother had to go through dehumanizing checkpoints. Even though she was a United States citizen and proud American, I was there when my city was in a terrible car accident, and my cousins and I cried so she could have access to the best hospitals.
Yeah, she hasn't visited her city in 13 years. She was granted permission after she signed a letter acquiescing to the terms set forth by Israel for a humanitarian visit, and then
Left
she
out by the left-wing media.
totally, and then when it was time to go into full performance art, the waterworks start. For more on this topic and others, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Jed Babbin, former U.S. Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times, the American Spectator. Jed, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Well, good morning, guys.
So there is some disagreement, though, in center-right circles about whether this was the judicious decision by Bibi and particularly at the behest of President Trump to deny entrance to these two based on their support for the Hamas-backed BDS movement or anything. They should have just let them come in and minimize the press attention rather than maximizing it. What do you think?
Well, I think that would not have minimized anything at all. Look, these are despicable people. They are racists. They are anti-Semites. They're anti-Israeli. And they are the people who are properly banned from Israel because all they wanted to do was make a big stink in the Palestinian areas, go out there, praise the suicide bombers and the rest of the terrorists, and pretend that they supported anything other than the destruction of Israel, which is really what their ultimate aim is. So I think what Israelis did was risky. I think what Trump did was risky, but I think that it's going to pay off in the end because these are the kinds of people every country bans. If you look at other people, they say, well, it's unprecedented to ban a duly elected representative from Israel. Well, that's not true. George Galloway, who was another slug, who was out there, an anti-Semite who was promoting terrorism and trying to destroy Israel, he's been banned from Israel. I mean, heck, there's a lot of people we ban for a lot of different political reasons to enter our country. So I think that their whole shower of tears is phony, and I think these are the kinds of people that the Democrats really need to think if they want to have as the face of their party, because that's what it is right now. The four of the squad, the four girls, they are, well, they are basically the worst of the Democratic Party, but that is now the face of the Democratic Party until the Democrats start divorcing themselves from these idiots.
But I still it behooves me to think that Jan Schakowsky, Congresswoman, Jewish, why she's not denouncing their position with BDS and other Jewish Congress lawmakers.
Amy, I wish I could tell you. The Democrats have most Jewish voters in thrall. They have since the days of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And I'm Jewish. I would no more vote for a Democrat than stand on my head and spit wooden nickels. This is not the kind of thing that people who are thinking about the best interests of their country would ever vote for a Democrat at this point, regardless of whether you're Jewish or not.
I wanted to stick on the topic of terrorism since the BDS movement is terrorist-backed. But ISIS, Islamic State, claiming credit for this devastating bombing in Kabul over the weekend. 63 dead, almost 200 wounded at a wedding in Kabul. And what that says about the state of play on the ground in Afghanistan and the relative strength of ISIS at present.
Well, I think we have to understand that these terrorists operate under whatever name is convenient on a particular day. So whether they're Taliban or ISIS or Al-Qaeda or whatever, they could belong to several groups, no group, any group they want on a given day. And the question really is, can we crush them? Can we win in Afghanistan? The answer is probably not. The answer is probably no, because we have got to stay there pretty much indefinitely. I don't believe we should have 14, 15,000 troops there. I think we have to have enough of an intelligence presence, enough special operations, and frankly, enough air power to bomb the snot out of these guys anytime two or more of them should gather at one more time. But the fact of the matter is, we're not going to be able to withdraw entirely, probably ever.
But was Trump right to try to expedite that withdrawal schedule and leave, as you suggest, sort of a skeletal force with an intelligence focus?
Well, I don't know what really his plan is. He's talking like there's going to be some withdrawal regardless of the conditions on the ground. And I think that's the wrong answer. I think we have to find a way. I mean, how can we possibly trust the Taliban, who are now saying, well, we're going to divorce ourselves from Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all the rest?
No.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
How well did that work before 9/11?
Mm.
Well, Let's move over to Hong Kong. There's been 11 weeks of protesting, and do you think there should be any American military involvement whatsoever?
No, that would be totally ridiculous and suicidal. I mean, Hong Kong is a city in China. It's on the Chinese coast, so is Macau. What we need to be doing, and what the president hasn't really done yet, is to speak out forcefully in favor of the protesters and their effort to gain freedom in Hong Kong. This whole thing started when the Hong Kong government tried to pass a bill that would require Hong Kong citizens to be extradited to China for trial there on any crime. And, that, of course, would ruin their chance of any sort of freedom there because the Chinese courts are going to convict whoever the Chinese Communist Party wants to convict. So the basic point is you've had upwards of hundreds of thousands, sometimes over 1 million protesters against this. The protests are now against China, not just against the bill. I think that the president is holding a standoff with Chinese President Xi Jinping on the basis of our threatened tariffs. And Xi Jinping is restraining himself on military action to put down the Hong Kong protests on the basis of that threat. Now, that threat needs to be more clearly communicated to the Chinese privately, to Mr. Xi Jinping. And also, the president needs to speak out loudly and clearly that Hong Kong should be free, and the Chinese must not put down that rebellion, not really a rebellion, but the protests, like they did the Tiananmen Square action 30 years ago. That was a bloody destruction of private unarmed citizens that the Chinese government just did to put down that quasi-revolt. So the president needs to stand up and stand tall in favor of freedom, and he hasn't done that yet.
We're several months into the contest for the Democrat Socialist nomination for president. This is not exactly their focus, of course, but have you heard anything sensible, thoughtful on the general topic of national security from any of the Democrat Socialist aspirants?
No, and why would we?
Okay.
I mean, the fact these guys are fungible. For God's sake, it doesn't matter which one of them gets nominated. They're all the same, whether it's Bernie or Kamala or Joey or whomever, Beto or it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
You can nominate any single one of them. The policies are all the same. They're all going to be the same kind of god-awful president. And, as much as we're all uncomfortable at times with President Trump, God help us if he doesn't get reelected.
He is Jed Babbin, former United States Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, contributor to the Washington Times and the American Spectator. Jed, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
And he joined us on a turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.